Hello, I'm going to talk to you today about education in Elizabethan England. So, first thing to think about is the attitudes that they had in England towards education. Now, from a Protestant perspective, many of the Protestants did want people to start reading more in English because they wanted them to be able to have access to the Bible, which had obviously been written in English for the Protestants. So it was important for people to be able to read and write in English so they had a better understanding of God. People also in society thought it was important to improve education because they realised it was important for trade and things like that. So it was important for society to improve the education at this time. Now, the main group of people that still ended up being educated were the nobility. So that would have been the higher classes that tended to receive education. Now, if you were a man, obviously you'd be more likely to get education, but women were still educated, but they just tended to be educated at home. One of the things that they would be educated in would be things like languages. One of the things that were set up and increased in Elizabethan times were the increase in the number of grammar schools. Now, most of the people that went to grammar schools were people from the wealthier backgrounds, but if you were from a poor background and you were seen to be having some academic abilities, there would have been funding made available for you. The school hours were quite harsh. They used to be in school for about 10 hours every day, and they had much shorter holidays than we have. So, whereas we have half terms and we have summer holidays, they would only have breaks for the Easter and Christmas time. Punishments were very similar in some aspects to how we would punish children in school. So, for example, you'd have your break taken away, or people might contact home from the teachers. But the punishments were also very harsh because the children could be beaten as well with the cane. So there was a slight difference there that they could beat the children with a cane. Other forms of education, well, some people had an alternative curriculum in the grammar schools, which meant that they could focus more on specific trades. And in addition to that as well, some people learnt their trades as apprentices. For younger children at the beginning of their lives, they would have had petty schools, which would have involved a teacher in the home teaching the children. And then there would have also been for girls, dame schools. And we can use this example as being a little bit close to how we discussed women in Nazi Germany, in that the children at dame schools, the girls there, they were educated separately from the boys, but also they were being prepared more for their roles as mothers and as wives, so they were being educated in more domestic things. Labourers and poor children tended not to have education as much, and they would have maybe followed whatever their family were doing. At this time, there were universities, and you had the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, and people would have studied lots of things like medicine and things like that, those universities. When we consider was education in Elizabethan England a success, we could argue yes, it was, because at the start of the period, 20% of men and 10% of women were literate, and by the end of the time period, that had increased a little bit to 30% of men and 10% of women being literate.